Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. So this is one of the highly requested videos and it is all about object oriented programming, and this is especially for non-CSIT students. It will help you to grasp the basic concepts as to why we use object oriented programming and what are its uses, and it will also help you in preparing for your interviews. So this is one of the videos which is really important for you at this stage if you have no preparation about object oriented programming or need to just refresh your concepts. So it will be really helpful. So let's get started. Alright, so first of all we need to talk about what is object oriented programming. And before going into object oriented programming, we need to have a little bit background about procedural programming. So what is procedural programming? Procedural programming is about writing procedures or functions that perform operations on the data. However, object-oriented programming is about creating objects that contain both data and functions. Now, what it means basically is that in case of procedural programming, what we used to do is we write everything again and again, wherein for repeating a particular function more than once, the code had to be written for more than one times, and this was a really cumbersome and time-consuming process, which led to the inception of object-oriented programming. And what it basically means that everything in object oriented programming is more or less like an object. And what I mean by the word object is that these objects can be used to refer more than one times. So these objects can have properties, and these properties can be referred using those objects. And if this is getting too much complex, we will be going into what is object and what are they useful for in a minute. And the main purpose of object oriented programming is to avoid the repeating procedure, or which is called as the dry approach, which means that we want to achieve the dry approach, which means don't repeat yourself. And this approach helps us to refer to our created objects or functions for more than once without writing multiple or redundant code, which means you just have to write the code once, and then you can use that particular piece of code for some different operations by using concepts of inheritance and other concepts which are available in object oriented programming, about which we will be talking in the next videos. And last but not the least, object oriented programming helps in making reusable applications with less code and shorter development time, because if we have some kind of a function which is also needed by a different method, or it is needed somewhere else but it has slightly different code, then in that case we have to just write a little piece of code which will inherit things from our previous functions, and we can reduce the line of code in this manner, which will help us to keep our code shorter and concise, and will help us to develop our apps in a shorter development period. So that is where object oriented programming really helps. So these are some of the points which you can note down if you want to, and these are some of the very fundamentals which you need to know about object oriented programming. Now let's move to what is a class and an object, and this is something which you would be hearing if you hear object oriented programming, and these are heard very frequently. So there is a simple example which is shown here. Now to understand what are classes are nothing but a kind of a blueprint. So it can be a blueprint of a car or of a house. So if we talk about a house, then in that case we have a blueprint of a particular house, that where the toilet will be and where the kitchen will be, and in that manner the house is built, and multiple versions of that house can be built using the same blueprint. In the same case, the example which we have here is of a car, where we have a class of car, and it is just a blueprint which will have the basic properties such as the car can have tires, headlights, a color, and a model and a brand and the year in which it was made. So these are some of the properties of a car which will be common to every car which is made. So a blueprint of a car is made, and this blueprint is used to make different cars, and these different cars are nothing but objects which are instantiated from the car class. So we have the blueprint of a car, as you can see, and then we have three different cars here which are labeled as object 1, object 2, and object 3. Now, the same properties which these three objects have are the tires, a color, a brand, a model, and the manufacturing year. And something different you can see on the pictures here is that the color of the cars are different, obviously. So that is why we say that objects are instantiated from a particular class, and if there are similar objects, which means there are similar properties but not equal properties, so they can be equal or they cannot be equal. So in this case, every car will have obviously four tires, so there is something same you can say, and each car will have a color, so that it is something different, or you can say that it is a similar property, so that every car has a color. And what this exactly means in terms of code, let's look at that now. So here we have a sample code, and don't worry, I will be converting this code in Python and showing you in this video that how you can see classes and objects and how you can use and refer them in your programs. So we will also talk about that in this video. So you can see that there is a class car, and it is declared as public, and it has a brand, a model, a color, and the year in which it was made. So just as I referred in my previous slide, that class is like a blueprint of a model or a design. So here we have the class car, which is nothing but the blueprint of all the cars which will be made using this blueprint. And then we have the objects of a particular class, where here in this case we have the class car. So as you can see that each object is getting created with the help of the car class, because the properties mentioned in the car class are also available in each object. In our case it is car object 1 and car object 2. So you can see that each car has these similar properties like a brand, a model, a color, and a year, and all of them are provided in the sample code given here. So for example, we have this BMW X5 which is green in color and was made in 1999. So the color of the car is green, and I have tried to show it using the text color. And in similar way we have a Ford Mustang which is black in color and was made in 1969. So it is shown using the black color. And just as we talked a little while ago, is that for every object we can refer to its properties, which means that we declare an object once and then we access its properties for as many times as we want. So you can see that using the dot operator you can access the properties of a particular class. And in our case we have, for example, the car object 1, and we are accessing its property brand using the dot operator. So we are putting the value BMW as the brand of our car object 1. So now let's just have a look at how you will do this in case of Python, and how you exactly achieve this particular thing, which is common across all the programming languages. However, I will be showing you this in Python because it's really easy and it's very efficient, and it's an important concept which you should know. So here we are in our code editor, and in this particular part we are going to just implement the classes and objects which we just saw in our slides. So let's get started. So first of all, I will start by declaring a class. So now what is a class? As I have already told that it is nothing but a blueprint. So we have a class of type car, and then we have properties inside of our class. So for that, let me just write the code and then I will explain you what it is all about. So what we have done is we have created a class of type car, and we have specified some values which will be common to every object which is created from this class. And for that we have used the init function. Now what is init? You can simply remember about init as an initializer. So for every class you create, there is an init function which has to work to create a constructor of that class. And using the init function itself, we are passing the values inside of our class, and these are the values which will be entered by the user. So we have brand, model, color, and year, which are the properties which we are going to enter inside of our object. Now you might be looking at the word self here, and this word self is nothing but a referral for each property which you are going to use to define your object. And that is why we use this particular method to do so. And let's now start by creating an object of a particular class. So we can write car object 1, which will be of type car, and since our default constructor will contain these values which we are passing inside, so we can directly provide these values here. So we can write, say, our car is BMW, which is having a model X5, which was having a green color and was made in the year 1999. So what we exactly did is we created an object of type car, and our car will have a brand which is BMW. It will have a model which is X5. It will have a color which is green in color, and it will have a year which is the year in which it was made, and it will be 1999 in our case. And one thing which you can see here is that we don't need to enter any kind of data type here, because Python is smart enough to infer the data type which is entered in our object class. However, this has to remain same for all objects, because we are not going to change any of them, and so it has to be the responsibility of the programmer or the code writer, who has to ensure that the object types are not changed frequently. If they are changed, then there are different ways to handle those cases as well, so we will be discussing them in the future videos. So now let's start by printing the properties of our object. So in this case we have the car object 1. Now it has certain properties. So using the dot operator, you can see that we can access the brand, the color, the model, and the year. And let's try and print all of them. So I want to print the brand. So for example, if I write print car object, I can use the dot operator to access the properties. So I want to print the brand. In a similar manner, I want to print the model, I want to print the color, and I want to print the year. So now let's check and run our code. So as you can see that the model, the brand, the color, and the year in which it was made has been printed. So basically what we achieved here is that, first of all, we created a class. So let's comment the part and give you an explanation. So we created a class, we initiated it with values which will be entered once we create an object. So these were the properties which we mentioned here for our car class. So these were the properties which were mentioned for the car class, and this was the car object which we created. And let's just write it out. So this is the object of type car with values which were provided by us, so provided by user. And then these were the properties which we printed using the dot operator. So this is what we did here. Now in a similar manner, if I want to create another object, say car object 2, which will have the properties of our Ford Mustang, and in a similar manner I can also access the properties of this object, because each object is different and each object has a different set of properties which we are going to define here. So let's change this to car object 2, and let's now try to print our output. Alright, so let's provide a separator here. So now as you can see that, first of all, we created a car object 1 whose properties and values are printed, as we did not change any part of the code. However, we declared another object which is car object 2, and we printed the properties of the car object 2, which are the brand, the model, the color, and the year in which it was manufactured. So that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed this video and you had gained a lot of concepts. And if it is a little bit too much, then try to go back and watch the video to grasp the concepts better, and try to practice them by trying to code it. And if you have any doubt, make sure to check our Telegram channels and we can discuss all the doubts over there. Also, if you have not subscribed yet, make sure to subscribe to our channel and be a part of the Ribox family. And also make sure to follow our Telegram channels, where you get the first update on our latest videos, so that you always remain up with your preparation, and keep learning and keep programming.